Thank you for joining Dr. James, Rini, and I, the Curiosity Conduit, for a look behind the curtain of Letting Destiny Deliver. Dr. Rini is an author and has 47 years of experience as a practicing psychotherapist who brings profound insight into the dimensions of consciousness. I bring my own lens as a retired law enforcement officer, now immersed in the study of psychology. Together, we invite you into a dialogue where destiny meets awareness and curiosity leads the way. Today, we will discuss no-win situations and paradoxes. This conversation may lead to feelings of inspiration and curiosity, and it could create some inner movement. That's all welcome. Life will reveal your destiny through all opportunities you keep yourself available for. So allow yourself to stay open and let's see what destiny delivers. I'm going to go into this first quote, and it's really explaining what we're talking about today. The no-win situation, which is better known as a catch-22, is a common source of toxicity in relationships. It occurs whenever you or someone else finds themselves in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Can you just explain a little bit on the no-win situations?
Basically, no matter what you do, you lose. I like to reference the sitcom Friends. Ross and Phoebe one day were having this discussion about the origin of man. And Ross was adamant that the theory of evolution was explaining the origin of man. And Phoebe was like going, I cannot believe that you won't even just entertain the possibility, just the slightest possibility, that it could be from something else. And finally, one day Ross goes, okay, I can entertain that there might be a possibility. And she goes, oh, I liked you better when you stood up for your convictions. So when he was rigid, she used that against him. When he was open-minded, she used that against him. Or you do something for somebody, he goes, well, I had to ask you for it. Or you didn't do it fast enough. There's always something that they're going to find that somehow makes what you've done wrong or inferior or not good enough. So it's very easy to put each other or even ourselves in a double bind. No matter what I do, it's the wrong thing. The technical name for this, which was discovered by Gregory Bateson, he was an anthropologist, was called a schizophrenogenic double bind. It was the origin of schizophrenia. Because the only way out of a double bind is to go crazy.
I just like the word.
Schizophrenic double bind, that's all right.
Yeah, it's like, I can't imagine this being like we're doing something like that.
So people put us in no-win situations all the time.
So when you explain that, it can drive a person crazy to be put in those situations, I suppose, at times.
Well, yeah, because there's no viable option that you have that's going to satisfy or please the person. I guess I'm thinking of a common one is, you can't get credit if you have no credit. So how do you get credit if you have no credit? Same thing with a job. You can't get a job if you have no experience, but how can you get experience if nobody gives you a job? Now we find ways out of those double binds, but it is kind of a no-win situation. You can't get it because you don't have it, and therefore you're not given the opportunity to get it.
Just got to get creative. That's what I say, but not everybody does that. Another answer. So I answer this with a pathway, with pathway 9. But I don't know. I kind of had a hard time like applying the pathways to this because clearly these pathways are done and there has to be some like with person who pretty healthy. But if they're not healthy and they apply this, would it still work? Basically, actions that give and earn love and respect. So say a person is not that healthy, but they're really trying and they're like, okay, they said in this situation, let's apply pathway 9. Would it work or could it work? And I suppose maybe it would only work if their definitions were proper.
No, I can see where that fits. Okay. Because, if you love someone, you want to build them up, not tear them down. If you respect someone, you're able to see them as they are versus how unwilling to hear them. If you don't respect somebody, you're not willing to hear them or see them. The word respect is really to look at again. Re means again, and spect are spectacles. So to respect is to look at again.
I like that.
And recognize is to rethink, recognize. Cognition is thought, to recognize is to rethink them. So in that, you have to train, as it says here, the only way out of the black hole is to train your ego to recognize the no-win situations. Like I'm sure I've said this before. What's the capital of Kentucky, Louisville or Louisville?
And I'm going to go with you and say Louisville.
Okay. No, it's Frankfurt.
There we go.
You see, because it was a no-win situation because I didn't give you a way to be right. But if you know what the capital is, you go, well, neither one of them. It's Frankfurt. So the ego to be able to recognize, okay, I'm being put in a no-win situation, and then make a process statement. Like, well, neither one of them are. See, it's a process rather than just picking out of what was given. You're saying neither one of them are, and this is what that is. Now, not that, again, we all can agree on what the capital of Kentucky is, but that's very objective. Subjective things are much harder to get agreement on when somebody is wrong. Not only are no-win situations one of the most common causes of toxicity in relationships, they are also one of the most destructive of the communication viruses. No-win situations are the black holes of the communication universe. The only way out of the black hole is to train your ego to recognize these no-win situations so that it can see what is happening and get out of the way. Another example is, you don't ever buy me flowers. So you buy me flowers. Well, you only bought those because I asked you for it. I can't win because even if I get them for you, it doesn't count because you asked me. But the person saying that also puts themselves in a no-win situation because they're not appreciating the person cared enough to follow through on that and give them what they wanted. Instead, they're rejecting them by saying, well, I had to ask you for it. So being aware that we're doing that, allows us to step back and not do that and produce greater connection. When we put somebody in a no-win situation, losing does not make us feel connected.
Oh, I also attached to this one. Not also, I did attach to this one, pathway 1, awareness of self, like starting there. To be able to train your ego, I feel like you need to start with having that awareness of self. Yes, no, maybe?
Yes, awareness of self is definitely essential in being able to discern what's me from not me.
The me, not me.
Axis. Right. But it's also the ability of the ego to be organized in such a way that it's able to see this pattern and get out of the way, so to speak.
Yes. Okay. Our patterns of relating develop from our various life experience and role models. This fact means that the odds are pretty good that you've been exposed to both toxic and nourishing learning experiences. But it doesn't mean, however, that you have been exposed to role models that helped you learn how to process such experiences. I mean, this is such a big deal. Most people don't have that role model,
Right.
So what do you do in those instances?
Well, you have to find new role models that,
Yeah.
some kids were raised in families where the parents cope by drinking. And so the only way they know to cope is to drink. You can't learn a language that wasn't modeled for you. You can only learn the languages that have been modeled for you. And unfortunately, most people have not been exposed to teach you process. It's more content.
Yeah.
This is how you ought to think. This is what you ought to say. But processing it, like your stomach processes your food. It breaks it down and then distributes it throughout your body to provide, the nutrition you need. And the ability to process both toxic and nourishing, because in that way you're able to either remove it or use it to nourish you. If you can't process it, it has no value.
So I look at this and I immediately think for an individual to pretty much tell them, hey, stop. And I apply pathway 5, which is avoid, denying, disowning, repressing parts of self. Being able to get closer and understand more of what you want, who you are by not denying, disowning, or repressing parts of yourself would allow such a person to be able to see what they want. Hey, see, you know what? I see that person, maybe that role model, new role model. I like that. That looks pretty good and healthy. I want to hang out with them or, whatever. But they can do this only by avoiding that disowning their parts of themselves or repressing or denying. Thought?
Absolutely, yes. That's why you want to avoid that, because you are constipating yourself. You're not processing it.
Yes.
And I know whenever you're in the hospital, they won't let you go until your bowels are moving. So it's not good to be physically constipated. It's not good to be mentally constipated.
True story. I have a question for you. You've mentioned you've been through some stuff in your lifetime, and you've mentioned for our listeners just even how like you'd supervise somebody and they were kind of amazed that, oh wow, like
That I understood that
yeah, because you've been through some shit.
adversity. Yeah.
Yeah. You say adversity, I say shit. And so, in theory, you probably didn't have that role model like a lot of us. Who I'm just curious, who was your role model that helped you kind of change where you were at, or it just naturally came out?
I would say my studies, really, learning, all the theorists and how they approach therapy. And I saw them all interconnected. It's just, like different parts of the chicken. There's the breast, there's the wings, so that whole process of learning therapy and kind of implementing that in my own life, and then working with clients that had lots of examples of, toxicity and nourishing. And so I learned it really from being a student and a professional in the line of work that I'm in. But, that was part of one of my goals in going into psychology, was learning how to be a healthier person for me as well as others. Because I was shy and insecure and, very uncomfortable socially, all those things. And I recognized those factors and wanted to fix them.
Okay, so no real tangible like role model other than yourself.
Well, no, it was more a diversity of role models.
Okay.
Some passed away, but they left videos or books. Some that were still alive, and then others that just came in and out of my office for therapy, or they were in and out of my life through relationships. And it's one of those things you can learn from every situation.
That's true.
I can remember being 5 years old, and I was mean to this kid, and I got pleasure out of it. And I remember saying to myself, you shouldn't get pleasure out of being mean to someone else, so don't be mean to people. So even at 5 years old, I didn't want to be toxic, we'll say.
You wanted to use your powers for good?
Yeah, before I even knew those words even existed, really, or those concepts existed. It's just, I've always been in dialogue with myself. And in that dialogue, I would do things like that. Either things that I thought were good and worked and wanted to continue then, or things that I see that I needed to change or eliminate. And another term for it, I guess, other than dialogue with yourself, is self-reflecting. Like athletes will watch video or film of themselves or other teams to get insight into how they can improve themselves or how to, play against their competitors. So we have the ability, which is uniquely human, to consciously self-reflect and to be able to study ourselves and make choices over what we keep and what we extract. See, like toxic people, the reason they're toxic is because they're not good at removing the toxicity. If you drink so much that, the alcohol can't be metabolized faster than you put it in, then you will reek of alcohol all the time because your body can't eliminate it faster than you put it in.
Paradox, another source of toxicity, occurs whenever we get the opposite of what we are trying for. This virus, like the no-win situation, is everywhere. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I already said it in what you quoted there. I'm kidding. Well, it's like, I often see, people have been in a relationship for so long, and one of the partners will say the female goes, they want to get married. And so it's like, they put pressure on that person to make the commitment. And why that's a paradox is because you now have turned what was potentially a want to into a have to. And then the person doesn't want to do it because they have to do it versus want to. Like you may be a great pianist, but if you do it for a profession, you don't want to play the piano in your off time. You may be a great car mechanic and you work on other cars, but you won't work on your own car because One of the paradoxes is turning a want to into a have to. Like getting married. It's a want to, but now that you're married, you have to be married. And when you have to, it has a different psychological impact than if you want to be married.
It's true. Like, so my dad, before he passed away, he would do $1 million contracts for lighting and outdoor lighting, like the Daytona Auto Mall, like all that stuff. And those, like, that's what he would do. But you go in his house, it's like the crappiest lighting ever. It's like the guy who can do the electrical stuff and then sell it had like no lighting in the house.
Yeah. So you don't want to turn a want to into a have to.
Right, because that's what
What
happened.
I like to do is turn a have to into a want to.
Yes.
Like I had to work for a living, but I chose something I wanted to do.
Ditto. I do love that.
So, there are paradoxes in speech, the sound of silence. Okay, silence shouldn't have a sound. So that even in our language, there's a bunch of paradoxes. I think there's one about God. Is God so powerful that he can create a mountain that he can't destroy? And if he can't destroy it, then how can he be all powerful? That's kind of a no-win situation probably there. That's, no matter what you do, you can't win. Can I build a mountain that I can't destroy? Well, if I can't destroy it, then how am I all powerful? So just something to be aware of. I can give examples, but I think awareness is different than insight. What we're doing with this is giving people insight that hopefully can turn into awareness, because awareness is, oh, I see that happening now in the moment. Insight is just, oh, I know I do that. Like I could have insight into I'm selfish, but not be aware of when I'm being selfish.
Okay.
So insight is helpful, but awareness is much better, because then you are in tune or attuned to it as it's happening, and therefore can make a choice as it's happening.
Yes, and this is why I chose Pathway 6 for avoid mindsets, limiting beliefs that create blind spots. Since you can't see it, you don't have that awareness, right?
Right. But there is a difference between insight and awareness. Insight, I've connected the dots. Awareness, I see it as it's happening in real time.
Clinically, one thing that I've been noticing, and I don't know if it's just from what I'm seeing or if this is just like across the board that happens. Clinically, is it even beneficial to give insight to somebody that does not have that awareness?
Well, I guess I can respond to it. Like in therapy, you don't want to give the person insight before they're ready for the insight, because it can create more confusion and dysfunction because they're not ready for it. But awareness is much more important. Like my wife and I were at a timeshare thing in Mexico. It was really a vacation, but they tried to sell you timeshare. And before you go in there, there's someone trying to talk you into it. And, I go, well, why don't you want to do it? I go, because it's the same thing that's happening here. No matter what I say, you don't listen to me. And that shut him right up, you see, because he couldn't deny it. So I used awareness that, hey, the very thing that is going on right here is the very thing I don't want to spend 2 hours trapped in. Awareness gives you here and now perception, where hindsight gives you insight, but it's after it's already happened. As I like to say, hindsight can become foresight, because if you've learned that, then hopefully you can be aware of when it's happening in the future. But since you've been there and done that, you know how to handle it differently.
Okay, so here we go. Why is it that the person you love the most is often the one you hurt the most or take the most for granted?
Well, see, and I don't really mean that to be a question. It's really a statement.
Statement number 2. Or why are you more willing to hear something from a stranger than from a loved one?
Yes, and I see that all the time in the marriage couplet counseling.
Couplets. You ever deal with couplets?
Yeah. The husband or wife go, well, I said the same thing. Well, of course, but they need to hear from a third party, for someone, I guess, who they don't feel has a bias or a stake in the outcome, But it's so that one is very prevalent. For some reason, we need to hear it from a third party.
You need to hear it from a third party, and then, or you will treat that stranger super nice, right? I've heard people say this, and I've said this in my lifetime as well. Why don't you just treat me like a stranger? Now, did I really want that? Absolutely not, right? No, but what I'm saying is that, man, you treat other people nicely, and I'm not feeling that,
I'm thinking of a case I had years ago where I was seeing a couple, and they were both dealing with major crises. The husband's daughter had rented a car but was under 25, so she had to get it under her father's name. And she wound up getting in an accident, had been drinking, and killed the person she had an accident with. But the person that was liable was the father. And the father had money. So now the daughter is not only going to be criminally charged, but she's going to be civilly sued. That's a lot of stress. And of course, that's going to come on to you. Not you, but the father. The mother, on the other hand, had a daughter that was just diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic, which is devastating to a parent to have your child be so ill, And so here's the point of the story. The wife in public would be so nice and seem to be so happy and get along with people. But when she was home, she'd be depressed and sad and complaining and whatever. And the husband goes, well, it makes me feel like you don't want to be with me because you're this way with about everybody else, but you treat me in a completely different way. She goes, well, I'm just letting my hair down. I'm just being myself.
Because she trusts him and feels comfortable.
Well, I don't know if that's the case. Probably a lot of people say, well, you're safe to do that with. The problem is, one, how it made him feel like she didn't want to be with him. And secondly, you're wasting your best behavior on people that probably don't matter that much. So it's much better, it's good to let that out, but also bring positivity, bring good energy to the relationship, rather than it's just a place to dump all that and be my worst self in a sense, because it's safe.
Well, I think this is taught too because, how many parents out there have had toddlers or young children who are just like, act on your best behavior, at least, act this way here. And if you're going to act up at home, and they're taught young to start doing that.
Right.
Because you're like, oh, good. They acted nicely. Oh, good.
Yeah. And that's, again, a very black or white situation. As we said last time, black or white, neither are right.
True story. True story. So, just as important as making the right decision is making the best of whatever decision you make. This is fantastic, right? So we don't always make great decisions, right?
Well, part of why I say that is because people get stuck in being indecisive, of not being able to make a decision for fear that they're going to make the bad decision.
And second guess themselves, right?
And because of that, then they make a bad decision because they make no decision at all. So what I'm saying is it's better to make a decision and then make the best of the decision you've made, because then you're putting yourself in a win-win situation rather than a no-win situation.
Right. And I love that, being in the win-win, because this stops any behavior of that second guessing or obsessing over something that's really not necessary when you can make a win-win situation out of it.
Right, especially if you start beating up on yourself, oh, I'm such an idiot and I don't make good decisions, and then that creates a whole characterization of self, right? And then you're trapped in that characterization.
I love the win-win. I love the win-win in circumstances too, where somebody may have said something or acted in a certain way, and reflect back on that and say, man, I wish I could have done that differently. And they may obsess on that. And then the win-win would be, well, if I'm given another opportunity, I'm going to do this next time. And you move on. That's what I personally do. And then the universe is wonderful and gives me those opportunities often. Okay, so for this one, I attach pathway 10. It's the action to the lifelong commitment to balancing opposing forces.
And this is one of the ways to do it, is to see.
Make it a win-win.
Right.
Make it a win-win. Yes, and that's just one of the ways to do that. I like that for sure. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we pretty much covered.
Thank you for joining Dr. Rini and I on this journey behind the curtain of letting destiny deliver. Join us next time as we will discuss self-fulfilling prophecies. Yay, I love that one. Remember to subscribe and like, and questions or comments are welcome below. Now ask yourself, what part of your life might destiny be trying to speak through right now? Keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, destiny isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. Until next time, be well.